Happy Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of your Thanksgiving weekend with us. Hope you get to spend the rest of it with family, some great food, and some football. And with that, we welcome you to the Ferris Network on television. And first tonight, America is tired. Americans are tired. You might sense it already. Maybe you'll figure it out at the Thanksgiving dinner table tomorrow because people are going to talk about it. But America's tired of the division, tired of the chaos, the fear, tired of that feeling that things just aren't working. And tonight, we can share 3 things that perfectly encapsulate just how tired we as Americans are and how much we want to move forward. Number 1, the anger and contempt we saw following Trump's 2016 victory just isn't there this time around. Polling from CBS and YouGov shows a majority of Democrats are not motivated to oppose Trump. Some even say they're motivated to support him this time around, or at the very least, listen to him. After all, he's now having some pretty Democratic-friendly people in his cabinet. The fight just isn't there for the American people, even for Americans who identify as Democrat. But for elected Democrats and the liberal-adjacent media, fighting against Donald Trump is the only thing they know, and demonizing those who support Donald Trump. Rex Huckabee wrote this op-ed for USA Today. Joe Biden must cancel Thanksgiving. MAGA and non-MAGA cannot break bread. If you voted for an adjudicated rapist and convicted felon who wants to round up millions of human beings and put them in detention camps, who thinks transgender people shouldn't exist, then we don't have a common ground in which to chit-chat over stuffing and pumpkin pie. Then there's this Thanksgiving from the notoriously anti-Trump and D.C. swampy, populated, totally obsessed Lincoln Project.
You may have been on the losing side of this election, but you are on the right side of history. We're still in this fight, and so are you. America is stronger than him, stronger than hate, bigger than one election. So this week, let's give thanks, and next week, let's give them hell.
That's uplifting. Malice towards none and charity for all reminds me of Lincoln's second inaugural. Lincoln's memorial was in the background of that shot, after all. Number 2, Trump's 2024 win shows it's cool to be patriotic again. We saw it in the sports world when athletes from all different backgrounds adopted the Trump dance. Maybe they don't necessarily support Trump, but they are over people who look down on Trump supporters. The Trump dance became a symbol. We saw it on celebrations during college campus time and at campaign events where Americans broke out into hymn.
Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Oh, Savior, as stars stand bright,
Americans are tired of the division, but they are also optimistic about the future. Americans are liking Trump more and more today. A Pew Research survey found 53% of the country now approves of the president-elect. That's up from just 40% when he got elected in 2016. But once again, Democratic elites and the still lingering progressive movement aren't listening to the rest of the country. Here is Kamala Harris in her first post-election video last night.
We will be armed with the faith and the fuel that tells us what is possible and then drives us to achieve it. So let's continue to organize and mobilize and stay engaged.
Democrats lost because of that attitude, because they thought fighting against Trump was their calling. Fighting against Trump doesn't lower inflation, doesn't fix the border or stop fentanyl, doesn't restore common sense to classrooms, schools, or sports teams, doesn't put Russia's Putin, Iran's Ayatollah, or China's Xi in their place. Professional Democrats rightly realized that America was angry and is angry, especially during this summer. But they mistook that anger and disdain for anger at Trump. The real anger was at where America is. And now Americans just want it fixed. We begin tonight with Chris Cillizza, journalist, senior advisor to the DGA Group, author of the So What Substack, which offers insight and analysis on the day's news. It's how I begin my day. You should as well. Cillizza, happy Thanksgiving. I see you are already in that jacket, ready for Thanksgiving dinner. You could sit down. There you go.
Anybody's ready, Leland.
Well dressed. There we go. Am I on to something here that professional Democrats feel as though fighting against Trump is motivating and the rest of America is done with that?
I think you are, and you know, it occurred to me while I was watching.
Thank you very much. We can eat turkey now.
It occurred to me when I was watching the Lincoln Project ad, because, you know, the truth of the matter here is, like, you know, the Lincoln Project is a for-profit entity that has made the people who are the founders of it very, very wealthy. And they're not going to stop making that content and making that argument against Donald Trump, because it's been very good. And by good, I mean lucrative for them. And so remember, you said the professional Democratic class. Yes, they are professional Democrats because they are compensated for their positioning and jockeying and strategy. And I think you can't overlook that when you consider why there's this continued.
Okay, so in Washington, you always follow the money, right? But am I on to something that the professional Democrat class that's making money out of this, the Lincoln Project, perfect example, is actually hurting their cause in the sense that so many Americans see that and reflexively say, that's what I don't like. At least Donald Trump's talking about the issues I care about.
Yes, I think that what we saw in the 2024 election was people voting for someone they might not have liked personally in Donald Trump, but who they felt represented their views on key issues like the economy, inflation, and immigration more closely. Again, in 2016, why did Hillary Clinton lose? Because her message was, well, you're not going to vote for that guy. In 2024, why did Kamala Harris lose? For a lot of reasons, but one of which was this assumption that people simply would not vote for Donald Trump. Well, that's now been disproven. To me, Democrats who learn no lessons from what happened, you know, three-ish weeks ago, are priming themselves to have it happen again.
And look, that's part of it, right? Because we saw over this week the postmortem of the Harris campaign, and there is this complete lack of, I'd say, self-awareness, right? That maybe it was not only the message, but the messenger that just didn't work. There was all sorts of complaints. We went through them all last night on the show, and they're in War Notes today, but they just didn't resonate. Kamala Harris put out a video last night.
I saw it.
I don't know if you've watched the whole thing. We did. Here is part of it where she says we need to keep fighting. Take a listen.
I still strongly believe the light of America's promise will burn bright as long as we never give up and we keep fighting.
She used the word fight 14 times in 9 minutes. There were parts of that video that if she was my Uber driver, I would have said, I'm not sure you're feeling okay. I'll just get out here. I'm good, and cancel the ride. I can't figure out how her staff, after 3 weeks of the postmortem, thought this was what anyone other than the most hardened, diehard progressives, professional Democrats wanted to hear.
I think that's who it's aimed at, candidly. I think it's to try to keep people engaged, try to raise money, try to sort of say, like, don't give up Democratic base. You know, the problem with that, as we saw in the 2024 election, is simply having an excited Democratic base. Remember, that was the whole thing that was different between Harris and Biden. Oh, well, the Democratic base is excited about her. It's not enough. people who the Harris campaign did not think would vote for Donald Trump voted for Donald Trump. And these are not people who are hardcore Republicans. And I think that's the problem. Now, I get it. It's right after the election. You're trying to tell your base something that keeps them engaged and interested. But that's not, again, I know you talked about this. I just very quickly on the postmortem of what went wrong with the Harris campaign. The thing that makes me the most insane is, the media just didn't cover the race right. Again.
Right, somehow it was the media's fault that wasn't nice enough to Kamala Harris. One thing that was also said was that the math was against them, how hard it was to win in Pennsylvania, on and on and on. Sean Spicer last night on Two-Way with Mark Halperin had, I think, the very best and most concise rebuttal to that. Take a listen.
Look in the mirror, guys. If you guys want to talk about how difficult it is to win Pennsylvania, to Dan's point, the evidence just doesn't hold up. Shapiro crushed it. Fetterman crushed it.
Okay, so again, going back to the Thanksgiving table that all of us will be at tomorrow night, maybe a couple of us will be lucky enough to have a few Thanksgiving dinners, hopefully one with fried turkey. What is the message going forward that you can get from that conversation?
I still think, and maybe I know people say I'm Pollyannish or sort of a relentless optimist in the face of evidence, but I still think we have much more in common than we have difference. Right. I think politics and media are incentivized financially and in politics vote-wise to highlight our differences. I get that. That's how it works. But don't be fooled that we don't have a lot in common. I have met and talked to people who supported Trump, who supported Harris, who didn't want to support either of them, who wanted Biden. And you know what we mostly talked about? Honestly, not really about politics. We talked about
I'm wondering how much
you got a teenage
now
son.
The election's over, right? That we don't have to talk about politics around the Thanksgiving table. And somehow the culture is healing, and if politics is downstream of culture, culture's moving on. Culture wants to go back to being what you are, which is a relentless optimist. In America, there's something going on here with Trump's cabinet, and who knows whether he's on to something or not. But this, I don't want to say team of rivals because we don't really know what they are yet, but it certainly is the most diverse ideologically cabinet you can possibly imagine, right? From Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz to Tulsi Gabbard, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a former Soros hedge fund manager at Treasury. Yep. Is for all the criticisms of it, and the bulwark went off on it, and everybody else is, this is terrible. But I'm wondering if Trump's not picking up on something, because he tends to have a pretty good idea where the culture is before we do, that America's sort of more interested in people who will get things done than any one ideology.
Yeah, I do think trying to cast this cabinet in sort of one light is a mistake. You have, to your point, you have the establishment types. It was Marco Rubio or Rick Grenell for Secretary of State. Well, Marco Rubio is clearly a more establishment figure than Rick Grenell. Now, on the other hand, Pete Hegseth is at defense, not a four-star general, not the kind of person we usually see there. Right. Tulsi Gabbard is at DNI. I just think, and I also think, by the way, Leland, Donald Trump, I know he's a Republican, right? And he got elected as a Republican for president twice. But this is a guy who is not super ideological in truth. He obviously, he's just not that guy. You can like that about him or you can hate that about him, but he is fundamentally kind of at root a pragmatist deal maker. And I think that this kind of represents that.
Yeah, no, he's picked up on this idea you and I talked about, that the mandate was to sort of burn it all down and change, and that's who the cabinet is. Hopefully there's no burned turkeys tomorrow. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours, my friend.
Thank you. Take care. Be well. Thanks always for having me.
All right, you too. Joe Biden has 50 days when he gets back from vacation to cement his legacy. So what's Jill Biden going to make him do to try and go down in history the way he wants? President Biden spending his last Thanksgiving in public service on Nantucket. And when he returns, he will spend the next 50 days trying to cement his legacy. It would be sad, of course, if it wasn't so scary that that's all he cares about right now. The last few weeks have taught us he is willing to do anything, no matter how reckless, to get apparent wins and adulation. He's telling his cabinet secretaries to spend as much money as possible. He's radically changing policy in Ukraine to encourage dramatic escalation. In fact, we had to do segments about new threats by Putin to use nuclear weapons. And he effectively blackmailed Israel into a ceasefire with Hezbollah. That ceasefire is really a 60-day pause, and it puts the United States in a terrible position of trying to police Hezbollah and Israel. But it gives Joe Biden a Rose Garden ceremony, and he wants more of those.
Today's announcement is a critical step in advancing that vision. And so I applaud the crazy decision made by the leaders of Lebanon and Israel to end the violence. It reminds us that peace is possible. Say that again, peace is possible.
Say that again. Perhaps that was in the teleprompter. Kind of fitting. Joe Biden, one promising to be the adult in the room. He had 50 years of foreign policy experience, and after 4 years, Joe Biden will leave office. Say it again. Totally humiliated. Joining us now, Mika Solner, congressional reporter for Punchbowl News, David Drucker, senior writer for The Dispatch. David, you've covered these sort of lame duck ends of presidencies before. Is what we're seeing anything new?
No, not new at all. What you always see from presidents in their final days, either because they lost re-election or they're termed out, or of course Biden here's a special case, they do everything they can to finish the unfinished business, to try and lock in as many of their priorities as they can before they leave, and to work on their legacy. It's part of human nature. It's part of political nature.
Yep.
And just from a nuts and bolts policy standpoint, presidents try to maximize every last ounce of their tenure that they can to get as many wins as they can, as they see it from their perspective.
I think you said it great. From their perspective, this is how Joe Biden views what a win looks like. Whether the American people do, we'll see. Mika, there is this other part of this, right? Because very rarely, I guess the only other time would be Al Gore in recent history, did we have a vice president who ran and lost, still in office, sort of also trying to cement her legacy, and also as the leader of their party. Didn't work out so well for Al Gore. Here's more of Kamala Harris's address.
You gave all that you could to support our campaign. Because of your efforts, get this, we raised an historic $1.4 billion, almost $1.5 billion from grassroots supporters alone, the most in presidential campaign history.
Mika, how is this Joe Biden's legacy run, Kamala Harris trying to cement her position in the party, playing with Democrats on Capitol Hill, senior Democrats around the country?
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking to Democrats across the board in the House and Senate, and they're doing the best job they can to try to spin the results of the election to something that's in their favor, right? So we're seeing, House Democrats saying they overperformed the top of the ticket, and not a lot of news. No one's really talking about Harris anymore, which is the most interesting part, minus the incumbents that actually lost their seats, blaming her for their failures to win re-election. But it's also interesting to see that Harris is talking about the amount of money that they raised, historic amounts. Democrats were saying this all cycle, and they still happen to lose, the trifecta.
Yeah, and so now the direction of the Democratic Party is here. David, real quick, just in the last minute or so that we have, liberal political activist Michael Moore isn't buying what Biden is trying to sell before he leaves office so far. Moore writes in his blog, landmines? Joe, seriously, this is your legacy? Talking about giving landmines to Ukraine. This is how you want to go out in a blaze of horror? Like if Joe's got to go, we all got to go with him right into World War III. Is this Joe Biden sort of in every possible way going it alone against the Democratic establishment, against the progressives, and certainly against Donald Trump?
I don't think so. And I think Moore was a little bit ridiculous there. Republican hawks have been calling on Biden to get Ukraine more lethal weapons and give them permission to use those weapons for several months, if not more than a couple of years. So in some ways, and this is pretty typical of Joe Biden, it's late to the party, but it's what a lot of his critics who support Ukraine have been calling for. And
that's what we heard from John Bolton. I hear you there. I got to get one last thing in.
Than that.
Well, it may not be, and sometimes it's not, right? That he just sort of wants to kind of do his own path. Mika, we said that Jill Biden may have a lot to do with this. Are Democrats starting to sort of wonder what her role is? A lot of sort of honest media has for a long time, but is there now more questions about her?
I think those questions were raised, regarding how long President Biden wanted to stay in the election in the first place. Was it his decision, or were there people around him? I think it's Biden's made it very clear that they're a very tight-knit family, and they kind of make these decisions together. So there was some, talks of that, Democrats kind of privately mulling about that, but I haven't heard too much about her in recent days.
Interesting. Maybe in a weird way, that's sort of how she wants it, as they head off after, 50 years in office. David, Mika, thank you both. Happy Thanksgiving to you and yours. We appreciate it. A Florida college is offering a crash course, call it that, an intense course in how the woke movement became so separated from reality. We'll take you to the land of no safe spaces. The Florida Liberal Arts College is about to offer a new course on the woke movement. Rather than praising the woke movement, I'd probably say they're trolling it. New College of Florida is the face of the state's education overhaul. The small school in Sarasota has several new faces on its board of trustees, as well as a new president. Almost all of them were hand-selected by Republican Governor Ron DeSantis, a fierce critic, as you know, of the woke movement. The overview for the new course, Woke, reads in part, the woke movement is best understood as a kind of cult. Its members are generally decent people with good intentions, but their methods are essentially illiberal. Comedian and journalist Andrew Doyle will teach the class. He's best known for his critiques of political correctness and identity politics. He's one of the many new faculty members brought in by the school's president, Richard Corcoran. Mr. Corcoran is with us now, president of New College of Florida. Nice to see you, sir. Thank you. So is this teaching about the ills of the woke movement, the history of it, how it gained power, just trying to dismantle it? What are students trying to take away from this?
All of the above. I mean, basically what we're having is a full discussion on something that's very, very prevalent. The election showed that this woke movement has tremendous consequences one way or the other. And so we put together, Dr. Doyle is an accomplished Oxford scholar in literature and poetry. He put together this course. He's very well known on the internet and otherwise. And he's got balanced approach. Judith Butler, he is one of the courses that or texts that he's using for gender studies. X. Kendi on critical race theory. It's a very balanced group of authors that he's having the students read. And as we say all the time, we're going to teach kids how to think, and they can figure out what they want to think. But we're going to expose them to all the great thoughts, all the great minds, all the great arguments from all these things that are very, very prevalent today. That's true free speech and academic freedom.
Look, it's often been said, right? Bias is not having an opinion, it's excluding opinions. And I think it's fair. You say that reading list is not excluding anybody. Everybody from Vivek Ramaswamy and Rufo to Ibrahim X. Kennedy. Fine. Is there something to be said that the massive anti-woke push, the anti-woke movement, is almost as annoying in a way as the woke movement is?
No, it's the complete opposite. The woke movement has shut down free speech, has created safe zones, has created DEIs where we say you belong. It's George Orwell and Animal Farm. We're all equal, but some of us more equal than others. So the anti-woke movement is saying, no, we have to go back to where there's real academic freedom, real free speech. There isn't this cancel culture. You don't have to be protected from some safe zone when you're being taught what's going on in a factual and unbiased manner.
Do you need to teach that, or couldn't you just do that and allow free speech and free thought? I'm trying to figure out why you need a class on it.
Well, look at the university system. I mean, we had this catastrophic event on October 7th, and guess what we found out? Even liberals, Bill Ackman, a Harvard graduate, goes back there and says, oh my gosh, this whole woke movement has shut down free speech. It's put students in physical jeopardy. They can't even walk to class. 60% of the people on campus think it's okay to either shout down or physically stop someone from free speech that they think is unsafe. And so this is a course that says, this is what it was. This is how it was created. This is what it's led to. And is it good? Is it bad? You guys decide. I think it's pretty clear, and the election speaks for itself, that most of Americans still believe that's a horrific way to run our college campuses.
We tried to find a clip online. I guess you'd call him Professor Doyle now, the comedian and journalist. To say that much of his material is not family friendly would be a understatement, insofar as that our producers couldn't find a clip of him that was appropriate for us to play. Is that who teaches and is the best vehicle for students to learn this?
No, I think that's an exaggeration. I'll give your producers and some of your staff search lessons on the internet. Dr. Doyle's taught last year. And also, independent study projects are a 1-month intense course, and we allow students to say, hey, I'd like to do an ISP on this, that, and the other. It's a collaboration between students and faculty.
So this is an independent study project? It's not a full course?
It's a 1-month full course, 4 credits. You just take one course for 1 month, and and it's a variety of courses. And he taught one last year. Last year he did basically a journey through Shakespearean plays, and it was fantastically received. And we said to Dr. Doyle, could you come back and do another ISP? And this is what he's come up with. And we thought, you know what? That's where we want to be. As a university, we want to be on the debate side of those issues that are absolutely shaping society and exposing our students to all the great thoughts and all those great arguments that come from either side, and let them figure out what they want to think.
Well, with that as the sales pitch, it's hard to argue with. President Corcoran, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Leland. Honored to be on the show.
Before you start your Thanksgiving holiday, we wanted to take a moment here to let you know that we are so grateful and thankful to you for your trust and time. There is no greater responsibility. I learned that phrase, grateful and thankful, from my good friend and mentor, Tom Sainert, proprietor at the Smokehouse Market in St. Louis, Missouri. Today, I wrote about some of his lessons learned over the barbecue grill and so many other places. Not just about running one of the world's most successful restaurants, not just about being a leader, but about being a good person and how to live your life. We are both a little bit younger in that picture. Hopefully you can take some time this Thanksgiving to tell those people who've impacted you thank you. May your holiday be filled with friends, family, football, and good cheer. If the conversation turns to politics, tell them about NewsNation. Tell them why you trust us. Tell them why you choose to spend an hour every night with us. And while you're at it, give them a subscription to warnotes.com. That's our daily newsletter. Comes out every day at 4 p.m. It is free. It's a good way to fight inflation. At Thanksgiving, tell them to sign up. You can also connect with us on social media at Leland Vittert. We're going to start having some new exclusive social media content here coming up that you don't want to miss. Dolores writes to War Notes, the situation in North Carolina is horrendous, and no one seems to be helping them. Why? If I remember correctly, after Hurricane Charlie, FEMA trailers were issued in Florida to 17,000 people. Why aren't they doing that for all of these families? And Dolores, you're correct. What's happening in Western North Carolina is heartbreaking. We've been covering it. I'm not sure there are good reasons why all those folks are living in tents and don't have FEMA trailers. Our Brian Enton is down there working on the story. Maurice writes, I'm wondering about immigration. I do believe we should go after those illegals who commit crimes and deport them. But why isn't that either party doesn't make discussing making it easier for immigrants to enter our country legally? We all know this country was built on immigration. And Maurice, you're right, speaking as someone whose grandmother came over here. We are a nation of immigrants. If Democrats could agree for swift deportation of illegal immigrants who commit crimes, plus a secure border, and Republicans could agree to a pathway to citizenship for some, plus more legal immigration, we could actually make progress. That would involve compromise. Roman Stout tweets, I really appreciate that you and NewsNation does reporting in the areas of the country that most of the networks and other cable outlets ignore. Thanks, Roman. That's what makes us news for all America. We believe that Washington is 68 square miles surrounded by reality, and reality matters a lot more than Washington. Tomorrow, many of you will gather with friends and family to celebrate Thanksgiving, maybe talk a little politics after you've talked about NewsNation. Our foolproof guide to getting through dessert with no arguments at the Thanksgiving table when we come back. To be thankful for. And invariably, talk will turn to politics. That is, unless you're refusing to invite those who voted for President Trump, like some have suggested, and even done so following the election.
It's completely fine to not be around those people and to tell them why. To say, I have a problem with the way that you voted because it went against my very livelihood, and I'm not going to be around you this holiday. I need to take some space for me.
There are certain things where you don't have to put your family in the middle of it. You can have dinner at another point, but it might not be the time to gather because there's going to be some tension.
I was not invited to my mother's house for Thanksgiving. Apparently there wasn't enough room. She said it was a scheduling situation, and then at the last second invited me to come over on Black Friday. I told her, no thanks, I'll be at Best Buy.
Jesse Waters has probably never been to Best Buy in his life, but that may be beside the point. A recent survey even found some Americans are dreading tomorrow. 64% say they're feeling stressed because of the election, 59% worrying about arguments at dinner time, and almost a quarter are thinking of skipping Thanksgiving altogether. Alex Hefner, host of Breaking Bread, says he has ways to bridge the political divide, joins us now. Is this as simple as just saying no politics at Thanksgiving?
Well, that would be a cop-out. It's sincere, but it's ultimately destructive, and we've seen that in our political life as a society. When you go into your separate silos or corners of the room and refuse to deliberate, you cease being functional. So we know that from Congress. We know that from the polar extremes that dominate so much of the major political parties. I recognize that in President Trump's reelection, the first non-consecutive two-term president since Grover Cleveland, he assembled a new coalition. He won more young voters. He won more first-time voters. He won more black and brown voters.
Yes.
Certainly more.
All true. How though, when you're there with Aunt Sally and Uncle Harry, who are the rabid liberals, and then you got your crew from where I come from, Missouri, or something like that, you're supposed to talk about politics?
No, I think it has to have a natural entry point. Look, it should come up in the same way that you discuss your kids or sports. If you humanize it, and it isn't the center of demonization, but something that is inspiring curiosity and intrigue and a way to tap into our collective humanity as human beings, then it could be a net plus. It's all about how you approach it.
Is it about how you approach it, or is it about how you respond when people bring it up?
Well, that's what I mean. I think in any kind of dehumanizing approach to it, that's not going to inspire the type of deliberation and thoughtfulness. But if you demonstrate yourself to listen, just first and foremost, listen, that's the first step to empathy. Actually having an open mind, it's the name of my program on PBS, The Open Mind, and you allude to Breaking Bread. So over the last 2 years, I've met with over 22 governors and senators and have had this type of exchange. I've seen someone like Governor Burgum, the incoming energy czar, cry over a meal of bison. Likewise, Senator Booker talking about trauma in his hometown of Newark. I mean, there is something to be said for politics not just being the art of the possible, but being about our fundamental survival as human beings. That's why we rally as a country in the aftermath of 9/11. Regrettably, during the pandemic, it became a visceral negative response to your neighbor instead of the more predominant form of interaction that we like. which is engaging respectfully and kindly. So we have work to do. If we just agree to disagree incessantly, that's not the makeup of our republic. And just think about the names, Leland, Democrats and Republicans. They're not totalitarians and autocrats. The name of our political party matters. And in this case, you believe in representative governance. You believe in aspiring for life, liberty, and happiness. You may have different means of achieving those ends, but that's where you have to negotiate the means. And we've failed as a country in negotiating those means.
All right. Appreciate your time. Thanks so much. Look, what you're doing is important. Talking about this, trying to get people together. New episodes of Breaking Bread available at 13.org/open mind. When big blue cities, happy Thanksgiving, Alexander, when big blue cities drowned out rural values, there's only one thing to do, and it's not move the drastic measure some are taking in an attempt to be counted. Divided your family is this Thanksgiving, it could be worse. You could be one of the counties across America that are trying to separate from their mother states. At least you all are at the same table. Greater Idaho, New Illinois, and New California are all ideas being put forth to create new states. Red rural communities would like to break away from big blue cities. New Illinois would take 7.5 million people from ruby red Illinois, create a new state apart from, you guessed it, Chicago. Those proposing these delusions say they are tired of having to pay for the debts of blue cities. Research from Paul Simon Public Policy Institute shows rural counties, in their estimates, greatly benefit from the funding going into those big cities. John Jackson, the co-author of the research, told the Wall Street Journal it's a ridiculous thing they want because we would be a third world country without the kind of money we get back from the state of Illinois. Think about that. With us now, G.H. Merritt, founder of New Illinois, and Illinois State Rep. Brad Hallbrook. Nice to see both of you. G.H., start with you first. In shortest possible way, succeeding from Illinois and creating New Illinois would help you and your supporters how?
Well, to start with, we never use the word secede. This isn't secession. It's the constitutional formation of a new state. You can say separate. Okay? Separate. And how will it benefit us? The key thing that we're looking for is representative government. We live in a state that is dominated by one county that has 40% of the population, and they dominate the rest of the state that has 60% of the population. And we don't look at this as a party issue, really. It's a result of the Reynolds v. Sims ruling in 1964 that took away any geographic basis for state legislative districts. And so we've been gerrymandered to death since then. The rural people have no voice.
Representative Hallbrook, when it comes to the rural issues, and I get the argument right that rural counties get services from big counties, and because you've got a state that has Chicago, there's airports and there's other things that you wouldn't have with just a huge rural area. But what would New Illinois look like that you all would be able to do differently than you can now?
Yeah, I think the first thing would probably be legislation, the way it's governed. It used to be that the legislature would put out laws for counties or cities over 2 million or over 3 million, or it would be for counties or cities under that number. But now it's one size fits all. We've seen unconstitutional legislation like the Safety Act of 4 years ago that did away with cash bail. Most recently, we've seen the gun ban, the PICA, Protect Illinois Communities Act of just short of 2 years ago, that just, because the crime is so bad in the city that they just cast this wide net and say all gun owners, law-abiding or otherwise, they've got to be regulated and their weapons seized from them or taken away from them or not able to use what they have. They have to turn them in, if you will, or register them. And so it's just this really bad policy ideas that are wrecking the way the rest of the state of Illinois runs. Rather than try to fit into a more regionalized approach. So I think it would be kind of the way it's governed, the legislation.
I think about the governor. I look things much more as a values-based than perhaps left, right, red, blue based. Here's the governor of Illinois talking about an issue that's become a huge issue across the state of illegal immigration and Donald Trump's promise to deport illegal immigrants. Take a listen.
To anyone who intends to come take away the freedom and opportunity and dignity of Illinoisans, I would remind you that a happy warrior is still a warrior. You come for my people, you come through me.
G.H. Merritt, does J.B. Pritzker represent you and your communities well?
Absolutely not. In fact, he mischaracterizes what we're doing. And I know he went to Duke and he got his law degree at Northwestern, so I'm sure he knows better than this. We're not trying to kick Chicago out of Illinois. We're trying to kick ourselves out. We don't think he represents us. He wants to represent a lot of the new immigrants. And so he talks about, dignity for his people that he's going to protect. And I'm sorry, that's baloney.
That's a pretty clear answer. Representative Hallbrook, not a lot of left of wiggle room in that. How much of this is about money?
Let me just address the budget issue under Governor Pritzker. Since he's been in office, the budget has grown over 30%. I think it's over $13 billion growth in the 5 years that he's been here. The next 5-year projection is to be short $23 billion, and the next fiscal year is something like $3.2 billion short, plus or minus, depending on which way you see expenses going or which way you see revenue going. There's always this argument that downstate can't survive without Chicago. Well, when you look at the numbers, you look how bad and how underwater the city of Chicago is in Cook County. It's like, why wouldn't they be the first in line to cut off the rest of the state of Illinois and keep all that money that they say they're subsidizing downstate?
Yeah, Chicago may not be able to survive without downstate. And you think about how many people are getting out of Chicago, that may be the better thing. Well, thank you both for coming. We appreciate it. Obviously, Chicago and J.B. Pritzker have a different feeling about this than you two, but keep up the good fight and let us know how it's going, all right?
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Stick around. Brian Entin in for Cuomo next.